right. Well, good evening and welcome everyone to the American Cetacean Society San Francisco Bay Chapter's March 2025 speaker event. And I'm Susan Hopp, board member responsible for our speaker program. And with me is fellow board member Wade Cobb. And first, for anyone new to the American Cetacean Society, we are a chapter within a national organization that is the oldest nonprofit dedicated to the protection of whales, dolphins, porpoises, and their habitat. And we do this through education, community engagement, and awarding grants towards cetacean research. We appreciate your donations in support of our mission. Donations fund our research grants and expenses for these talks, and it's easy to donate on our website if you haven't at the time of registration. And I'll just add, I'm very excited to report that our speaker for June will be one of our grant recipients, our recent grant recipients, Jessie Meyer, who will share some groundbreaking research on blue whales off the Pacific coast. So again, thank you so much for your support. We are recording tonight's presentation, and please put your questions in the Q&A. That's better than the chat, and we will field them after the presentation. So tonight we are celebrating spring, a time of birth and rebirth with an extravaganza of marine life, Baja in spring. But first, and hopefully you know from our newsletter, that we are trying something new in our fundraising activities and have paired tonight's focus with an online art auction. And so before I introduce tonight's speaker, I would like to introduce board member Firuze Gokce, who is the very talented artist behind the two paintings. Firuze will take a few short minutes to share her inspiration of these two depictions of cetaceans we all love. So Firuze, please share.
Thank you so much, Susan. So let me share my screen. All right, so how about now, everyone? So thank you so much for joining us tonight and having this beautiful day together is a great gratitude for me. So I just want to start with the reason why I'm creating this art and what's behind the art. So there are two characters in my art. One is Fran, and the other one is a orca from Crozet Island, which lives in between South Africa and Antarctica. So let me just start with the orca called Dolphin. Dolphin was a 14-year-old youngster, but she was very wayward and disobedient, and she loves to just hang out and just always distracted. And the mom called Lee Song, and these are real stories, and I can give the web addresses, the URL of the YouTube video, so you can just really see the story behind that. And Lee Song tries to teach her, especially when she was hunting for the seals, because she needs to learn the ability to beach herself while she was hunting, whether we like it or not, but that's the nature of the orcas, in that area. However, a dolphin is always interested in with playful exploration. And one day while the family is cruising, and by the way, this is a five team, sorry, not team member, of course, but five members of the family. It's a pod. And one day while they were cruising, Dolphin separated from the family, and she found herself in the Kyak forest. And she lost. So she starts crying, and then she just asked for help from her mom and the pod finally found her after 2 hours later. And such, extraordinary thing happened. They were celebrated joyfully by breaching and jumping and clearly expressing their deep bonds and love and relief. So kelp forests are very important for an orca's life. They are not only the playgrounds, they are also essential items for their sensory stimulation, social interactions, hunting, or protection from harsh environmental conditions. So if you liked a bit, you can use the link, and also I share it on the chat box, and also you can use the QR code. So our next story is, sorry. Oh yeah. Our next story is a beloved humpback whale, which is familiar to California, a humpback called Fran. And this is Serenity below watching a humpback called Fran. And this is a tribute for her to celebrate her life. Actually, unfortunately, she was washed ashore in 2022, and because of a brutal force, and probably the most probable the outcome is a ship strike. So let me just give a little backstory about her. She was known since she was a calf in 2005, and she was observed hundreds of times. So that's why she's so famous in California. And finally, she had her first calf in 2014, and then the other calf was born in 2022, and she was called Arya. Once she found a shore, and people and scientists get very anxious about what happened to the baby, because the humpback calves need to be around their mom until they are 1 year old, at least 1 year old. And this calf was only 7 to 9 months, so there were lots of fear about the health conditions. But finally, Arya showed up in 2023, and she successfully survived in a harsh winter. And these are all survival stories, and their intelligence, their emotional strength, and their adaptability, and how rich their lives are, how they are bonded as families. So this gives us this strong urge to protect them and really cherish their lives, because our lives depend on them and their lives are depend on us. So just a quick information about the auction rules. The bidding has been started from $200 and increases by $50 for each bidding attempt. The market value for each art piece is $445. The shipping cost will be handled by the bidder. The pieces are unframed because that's the cheapest way to ship the art pieces, but 24-inch to 36-inch IKEA frame is ideal for these art pieces, and which is very cheap. Bidding will end tomorrow before midnight at 11:59. And if you ask any questions, you can send an email to acsf.info@gmail.com, which I will share it on the chat box. Thank you so much. Take it away, Susan.
Oh, Firuze, thank you so much for sharing the inspiration behind your art. So, okay. And by the way, Firuze does all of our social media and our website. So anyway, she's really talented in many ways. Okay, well, now let's get on with the show. Let's go to Baja with Marc Webber. Marc is our resident marine biologist board member. We're so happy to have him, who recently returned from Baja, a trip he leads every year pretty much at this time. So, just a little background on Mark. After a 30-year career with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the National Wildlife Refuge and Marine Mammals Management programs, Mark is currently a cetacean field research associate at the Marine Mammal Center, an organization he has worked with extensively with stranded marine mammals going back to 1976. Mark is a native San Franciscan. His current research is on the cetaceans of the San Francisco Bay Area, harbor porpoises, bottlenose dolphins, gray whales, and humpback whales, even as he continues his lifelong fascination with pinnipeds through several ongoing projects. His field work has taken him around the world, from Antarctic to the Arctic and the Pacific coast whale migration paths, which we're going to hear about tonight. And he is a contributing author on anthologies of marine mammals, their behavior, and habitats. So, Mark, thanks so much for sharing this, and please take us to Baja.
Thank you, Susan. Good evening, everybody. Glad to be with you. This talk I'm going to give you is about a place that's very near and dear to me and has been going back to the early 1980s. I've been very privileged to be on one version or another of this itinerary I'll talk to you about tonight, 38 different times. I just added it up this evening to be sure of that. So it's a place that I've seen over a number of decades, seen it change, seen the species that occur there and visit there and make their homes there change in numbers, both good and bad. It's just been a great experience. So what I'm going to do then is just give you a run through this presentation, and let me put it on the show mode. Let it convert, hopefully, to that. There we go. Is everybody, Susan, can you just confirm it's all good?
It looks good.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Great. Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Susan. I've also put a few other affiliations I have on this title slide. I have been associated with the California Academy of Sciences for most of my career as a research associate, and I'm privileged to be able to teach in the University of Alaska system at the Kachemak Bay campus in Homer, Alaska, and have been doing so for almost 15 years. This itinerary, this trip, is one that was pioneered back in the early 1980s and has been developed and refined by a number of expert captains out of the San Diego sport fishing fleet that were always interested in finding good things to do during the winter when it's not fishing season. And they discovered a long time ago that you could visit the coast of Baja and experience many kinds of marine mammals. In particular, a huge draw is going down to San Ignacio Lagoon, about halfway down the peninsula, numbers 4 and 5 on the diagram on the right, because these gray whales in this lagoon are very easy to approach, comfortable with boats around them, and incredible sightings and viewing opportunities, unlike anything you can get anywhere else in the world. For practically any other kind of whale can be had in San Ignacio Lagoon. So here's the itinerary that this trip generally follows. Leaving out of San Diego, clearing Mexican and Customs and Immigrations in Ensenada, and then having a day at sea to San Benito's Island 3, where we make our first landing in Mexico off the boat and explore an island that's rich in seals and in geology and endemic species. Moving on from there, we go to San Ignacio Lagoon, where we spend a couple of days, one at anchor, two days and one night. We go in early in the morning, enjoy the lagoon all that day and the next day, and leave about sunset on the second day. Then we sail all night, and location 6 is off Magdalena Bay. We don't go into Magdalena Bay on this particular itinerary, but rather sail along it and south along its face, enjoying marine mammals and seabirds as we enter essentially tropical waters just below Magdalena Bay. From there, we wake up the next morning in the Cape region, as it's sometimes called, Cabo San Lucas area, the end of the Baja Peninsula, where we target the Gorda Bank, which is an amazing location and is a destination location for calving and mating humpback whales, very much like Hawaii, not quite as large a scale, but the whales gather there, have their young there and mate, and it's an incredibly dynamic place with all kinds of humpback whale activity at this time of year. From there, we turn the corner and go up into the lower Gulf of California and spend a number of days exploring the islands of the southwestern Gulf and some of the mainland sites that are very remote and isolated that can be reached most easily by an expedition tour boat like ours, the Searcher. So every day is a different adventure on a different location with hiking, whale watching, and snorkeling. And finally, the ship doubles back to Cabo San Lucas, where the group disembarks and heads home or heads on to further vacation in Mexico. But before that all begins, it's become a bit of a ritual for me to visit La Jolla, just north of where the ship is located in Point Loma and San Diego, because La Jolla has phenomenal seal and sea lion viewing right from its shoreline. There are California sea lions at Point La Jolla and a cove with harbor seals, and I just wanted to show you why I go back there. It's just such a favorite place of mine with such wonderful views, close views, right alongside a boardwalk trail of these California sea lions you can see here, and a few more in this collection of images. Very active, dynamic place. They seem to ignore the people. They're quite acclimated in the sense that, fortunately, the local government has restricted people from going down amongst them, which literally, believe it or not, was happening for many years. But the sea lions come ashore and even pup in this location, raise their young. So it's become a kind of a year-round home for California sea lions. Then just a quarter mile from there is this lovely cove that is closed off to human use during the harbor seal pupping season from about early February into about April. They pup a little earlier down there than they do up in Northern California and points north of that. They haul out in this cove really unmolested. They too have, unlike harbor seals in most places, become quite acclimated, and people are up on trails and on pathways above their beach, almost on three sides of them completely, yet they almost fully ignore them most of the time. So some of the best harbor seal viewing I think I've ever had is in this location. The pups are born there. I haven't been lucky enough to see a birth, but some of my friends and passengers who go there in advance of trips have. There's a very young pup in the upper left, an animal in the water thrashing its flippers around. It's an activity that harbor seals do during their mating season. They smash their flippers on the water to make a loud cracking noise, presumably males, to defend what my friend Sarah Allen has once called a maritory, an aquatic type of territory for their exclusive use in mating or attempted exclusive use. So they come and go from this beach and are quite abundant and quite easily watched. So from there, we get to the Searcher, and we start on our way. We go by Mexico's customs stop at Ensenada, spend our day at sea, and so we'll take you straight away to day 3. That day at sea can be quite productive of things I'll show you pictures of later of many kinds of marine mammals and seabirds. It's not just a transit day by any means. Any day we're at sea moving, we are usually finding quite a few marine mammals and seabirds to enjoy. But I'm jumping ahead because I'll show you pictures of most of those animals later on in the talk. So day 3, we go to San Benito's Island and disembark there for a day ashore. And then beyond and after that, you can see on the map where these two locations are, we head to San Ignacio Lagoon, again, a nighttime passage and a dawn arrival at the entrance to the lagoon. But we'll get to that in just a moment. So here in the picture, you see in the upper level, 2 of the stars of San Benito's, in my book anyway, northern elephant seal and Guadalupe fur seal. And of course, the star of San Ignacio Lagoon is the gray whale. So on arrival at San Benito's, our boat Searcher, and there you have maybe your first look of it for the show, anchors up near the western island, and we make a landing. And you see on the right the beach we first land on at the foot of a local fishing village that is used seasonally by artisanal fishermen and families that come over from Cedros Island, a very large island. In fact, you can see the haze of land behind the mountain directly behind Searcher. That is Cedros, which dwarfs the San Benitos Islands. It's one of the larger islands in Baja. They come over and spend periods of time fishing in the waters around San Benitos and have done for generations. Then on the island, this particular picture on the right, we gather up as a group to discuss some of the issues with respect to moving around safely and with respect to wildlife safety, trying to do as little as we can to impact the wildlife of the island. One of the things that's quite important about San Benitos is it's the largest seabird colony really south of Alaska. Not quite 1 million birds, seabirds nest on this island, and most of which you don't see when you visit. They are birds that live and their lives ashore in burrows. They excavate out into the soil of the surface, which are easily collapsed if you don't walk a good line and don't know how to look out for them. So this fellow here is introducing us to the island's wildlife. He was there doing research on elephant seals, but he was helping us understand some of the precautions that are needed to protect a very vulnerable seabird colony from unwanted disturbance. Some of the birds you see on the bottom row, you see a Cassin's auklet on the left, a Scripps murrelet singleton, and a Scripps murrelet with chicks on the center, and then a black vented shearwater. And even that shearwater is an underground nesting bird. And all of that is done to avoid the ravages of predators like ravens and large gulls. So these animals come and go from a seabird colony like this under cover of darkness, get underground during the day to incubate eggs or raise chicks or interact with their partner, and then make forays to sea at night. San Benitos begins our introduction to the endemics of Baja California. And Baja, Mexico's Baja California, is really very much like, in its own way, the Galapagos. When you think about island endemism and evolution, you need to start to think about important aggregations of islands in other parts of the world. And Baja, on both its west coast and in its Gulf Islands, has numerous endemic species. And endemic animals and plants, of course, are organisms found nowhere else and are often even restricted to certain islands, as are these organisms. You see a savanna sparrow that's now the San Benitos island sparrow, a type of side-blotched lizard that's endemic to just San Benitos Island. It's gotten there as probably drifting out on a log of some kind. San Benitos was never land-bridged island, even during the lowest sea level points during glaciation. So this animal's ancestors got there by drifting, no doubt, across a space of water and surviving the landing and thriving on this island. And then you also have endemic plants. It's a little mammillaria cactus in the bottom middle, and a mallow type plant on the right. Those are both also unique to San Benitos Island. And that story is going to repeat, and it points out the importance of all of these islands and ecosystems for conservation. Mexico is doing a fantastic job designating parks and reserves and getting rid of invasive species like predators such as rodents and cats, trampling animals like burros, and preventing invasions of new species that would cause harm to these fragile systems. So San Benitos is a lovely place for a walk with wildlife and great scenery. It doesn't have a really well-defined trail. This is just an approximation of the trails and distance, but there is a lighthouse, a historic lighthouse on the west side. We land on the east, a little bit to the south of east, and make our way across to see elephant seals first, usually Guadalupe fur seals next, and then a group of folks that like a little bit of a stretch their legs kind of hike, make the circumnavigation, while others who are more into wildlife photography stay on the what we call the marine terrace or flat areas, photographing wildlife, particularly seals. And here what some of those guys look like. One of my favorites, the northern elephant seal, is home on San Benitos Island. Northern elephant seals, as you probably know if you know a little bit about their history, were horribly persecuted during the time of peak times of whaling in Mexican waters and lower California waters, when whalers had time between or weren't successfully finding large numbers of whales. They would turn on these very large pinnipeds, the second largest species in the world, and kill them for their blubber. These animals were not harvested for fur, but simply for fat, which was rendered into really good, high quality oil in their minds, and as a good supplement for whale oil, which is one of the reasons they were in Baja, was to hunt whales when places like San Ignacio Lagoon and Scammons, as it was known initially, or Laguna Ojo de Libre now, were discovered. They were decimating gray whales, but in the meanwhile, they would go after elephant seals. Some people believe, most everybody believes the population was beneath 100 individuals surviving. Some people believe it was 10 or less. Some genetic evidence points in that direction. It's extraordinary decline and loss and genetic bottlenecking no doubt resulted. However, the species has fully recovered at this point, is very abundant and re-inhabited its entire range. It's several 100,000 animals strong. So you can see some elements of the cycle of elephant seals. Bulls come ashore first, upper left and upper right. They start to fight with each other, sort it out a little bit. They don't defend real estate like sea lions and fur seals. They defend their status in a dominance hierarchy. So they become an alpha of a given area, and others are submissive to that individual and move away from its area. Females come ashore next, give birth to their pups, and in the span of a month, take those pups from about 70 something pounds to over 300 pounds just on their milk alone. They do not leave the pup while having given birth. They stay with it, nursing it intensively. And about the time it's time to depart, and you can see, if you look carefully, the female on the right is a little skinnier, and she's in the process of being mated with by a bull. The bulls are constantly roving around their areas, seeking females who are about to depart, and usually mate with them before they leave the area, once about the time they're weaning their pups. And those pups, then called weaners, are left on their own. They have to figure everything out. They have to kind of wait for that elephant seal light bulb in their head to go on and get themselves out to sea and start living the life of an elephant seal. That usually takes a number of weeks of laying around thinking about things, about their fate, how good it was a little while ago, and how hungry they are probably at the moment. At some point, they all take off and head out to sea and start being a northern elephant seal, which means they venture into waters way to the north of Mexico or California, into the Gulf of Alaska, and far out west to about the longitude of Hawaii and beyond. So they're extraordinary migrants and travelers, and they do that twice a year. They all go out to sea after the breeding season, and then they start coming back at different times later in the year to molt. But every time they go to sea, they go back to the same distant locations, which are their primary foraging areas. The animal in the upper right is throwing sand. It's an interesting behavior. They do that to cool themselves on days when the sun is out. They'll throw moist sand. They'll dig down into the layer of moist sand below the surface, throw that up on their backs to provide a little screen and a little cooling. And they'll also do it when they're stressed, if a male's approaching or there's commotion and ruckus in the colony. Well, from those elephant seals, which had an amazing survival story, we're turning now to another seal that also has an amazing survival story to tell. And one of my absolute favorites, the Guadalupe fur seal. I've been connected to Guadalupe fur seals through my good fortune to work at the Marine Mammal Center going back into the late 1970s, along with colleague Jan Merlotto who's now at the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary. We published a paper on what were then northern records of Guadalupe fur seals in Half Moon Bay and Monterey Bay. Wait for that story to unfold as I tell you more. And I hope you don't mind putting your seatbelt on for a little data and a lot of fur seal talk, because it's a favorite of mine. Just some history briefly to go over. They too were decimated, as were all fur seals all around the planet. Yankee and British sealers ranged out over the world searching for fur seal colonies. Now, these animals were hunted not for their fat. They weren't particularly fat. However, they had a very rich, luxurious fur, not as luxurious as otter fur, but nearly so. And the pelts brought prime money in China, England, Europe, United States. For example, the richness of the fur seal killings was in 1805, for example, for Guadalupe's, a British sealer in 19 days took over 8,000 skins in Baja, California. And that was even before the species was known to be a species. It wasn't described until 1897. By 1900, it was considered extinct. None were to be found anywhere. However, some were around, and in 26 and 45, each time they were sort of rediscovered, and then they disappeared once again, at each time thought to be extinct. Finally, in 1954, the famous biologist from San Diego and Scripps, Carl Hubbs, on an expedition to Guadalupe, discovered 14 individuals. And from there, the recovery has been more steady and apparent. By 1980, they were expanding back to San Benitos Island and starting to have pups there in the late 80s. The California Channel Islands are being populated, and even farther north, up as far north as Washington State and beyond. But northern animals now, remember my little note in the scientific literature, didn't have bearing for very long, because by up to at this point, they are now common off California, Oregon, and Washington, or at least relatively common. And the recovery continues, although it's still a protected species, being listed as endangered in Mexico under their conservation laws and threatened in the United States under our Endangered Species Act. The population, though, has recovered to this point very nicely to somewhere between 34 and 44,000 individuals, which is considered about 20% of what there were before the sealing days, before contact with Yankee sealers and British sealers. Okay, there's your lesson in Guadalupe fur seal history. Just some pictures to enjoy, I think, of this. I certainly find this to be a very attractive and fascinating species to observe and study. There isn't really a time when they're ashore, hardly, that they're not busy. If they're not asleep, they're scratching, they're molting, they're barking, growling at each other, they're biting each other, they're carrying on in all kinds of crazy ways. Beyond that innocent looking appearance, maybe in the upper row are some savage sets of teeth that they're happy to use. Now these are mock or play or sparring fights, but nevertheless, you wouldn't want to get crossways with those teeth if you didn't have to. And these are all juveniles, by the way, youngsters. So just an evidence of the rebounding population, that pups are being born in Guadalupe, excuse me, San Benitos, and Guadalupe. Of course, that's the namesake island where the majority are born, but the births on San Benitos are picking up. And we see at this time of year, lots of youngsters from the previous year, now starting to see juveniles, subadults, and we even see moms late in their season returning to feed their pups after lengthy foraging trips and before they give birth again in May. So in our late winter and spring, it's the end of pup rearing season for the species and preparation for the next season of birthing. Okay, so from San Benitos, we sail off and often find whales and dolphins along that rest of that afternoon as we sail towards San Ignacio Lagoon. And you can see a little detailed view of San Ignacio Lagoon on the right. It's about 20 miles long. It runs mostly north to south. You can see a little symbol of an anchor, approximately where searcher anchors. The lower lagoon where that crossing arrow is, that is the area where tourism can occur. Mexico has quite a series of significant regulations to protect gray whales and to create sanctuary areas in the lagoon. It's well and intensively managed in terms of number of boats allowed out, duration of trips. All those things are under management plans. And we enter the lagoon. We're one of the few ships left to do that still, and anchor in this lower lagoon area. And from there, one of the, I think, wonderful aspects of the program is that we use are guided through our visit by local pangueros, people who live in the lagoon area and are part-time fisher folk and part-time eco-tourist operators. And so they come to us and take us on our multiple trips across 2 days throughout in the lagoon, enjoying the lagoon system. And they're amazingly skilled at operating around the whales. They know them extremely well, and their boats, and it's just a joy to have a chance to work with them, get to know them, and also know that our visit is supporting, positively supporting ecotourism and the protection of this lagoon, because it was in fact because of the financial incentive and the interest in ecotourism that the people there resisted a plan to develop a major salt works on the shores of the lagoon, as was done in San Scamon's Laguna Ojo de Libre. That was turned away by the decision of the Mexican president at the time, but chiefly being because he was lobbied intensively by the local residents who wanted their home, their area to be protected and maintained in perpetuity for the whales and for the wildlife. And this is a tremendous wildlife area in many other respects as well. All around the desert surrounding the lagoon is phenomenal. So in the lagoon, we see quite a few different kinds of birds. There is a very large resident population of coastal bottlenose dolphins, but everybody's there for gray whales initially, and the excitement's kind of palpable once we get there and get the anchor down, and our pongas come out, and we get our first sightings. These two pictures on the upper right and bottom were taken by my good friend Tom Jefferson, who was just there this year as well, and some of his great pictures from his whale watching on the lagoon and there's one of the pongas that are chartered for the visit. I have pictures in here by a lot of friends and naturalist colleagues who are just amazing teachers and photographers, and I just couldn't do better than showing their pictures. I certainly don't have all the bases I wanted to have covered, but you can see the gray whales can be gathering up in groups throughout the lagoon, others in calves. Here's one that's mouthing opening at the surface. You can see the short, coarse, yellowish baleen, and then the lower left is a mother with a calf. Here's a great picture Tim Melling from Nature Trek took recently of a gray whale coming up through the water towards one of the pongas. I guess he must have had a good lens or a GoPro going or something that you could see down into the water. I think it's just an extraordinary picture of the kind of close-up look and experience you get in San Ignacio Lagoon. Here you see some of the other behaviors that we see in the lagoon. There's quite a bit of activity going on. There are mating groups. I don't have any pictures of that this time for you, but there is quite a bit of mating at the entrance to the lagoon and in the lower lagoon, which usually involves 2, 3, 4 whales at a time chasing around after each other. But we also see a lot of other surface activity, such as spy hopping or spying out, as the animal on the left is doing, breaching in the middle here, and kind of a spy/lunge, a little vigorous motion on the right. And on the right, you can see, in fact, on the left, that gray whales have a couple of grooves of folded into their throats, which allow them to actually do some of their expansion of their mouth cavity and throat cavity for suction feeding. So those grooves are an important characteristic of their anatomy related to their feeding activities. You can see also, of course, gray whales are grayish and also quite mottled in appearance. Well, a lot of people have heard about this, and it is the case that a lot of people go to San Ignacio with the hopes of encountering a friendly whale. Now, any whale that comes anywhere near a ponga is a friendly whale, just to put that out there. However, this lagoon, since the late 1970s, discovered by Stephen Schwartz and Mary Lou Jones, two of the pioneering researchers for gray whale biology, who've been going to San Ignacio ever since and studying these whales, were the first to discover that or encounter gray whales that turned out to be friendly to the point of seeking contact. And it's spread since then through the population. And you can imagine, we see mothers with calves. That's a calf on the left, for instance. Mothers bringing their calves to these boats. And even when the calf is timid, maneuvering themselves to push the calf gently and slowly and easily towards the skiff for contact. I kid you not, we've seen this many times. On the right is a juvenile whale, and you can imagine that probably that whale had this experience as a calf or learned from its mother. And it seems to be passing along through the society culturally over the decades. And it's the one lagoon where gray whales go, and they go to several for their calving, where friendliness is common versus the other locations where it's fairly uncommon, if not rare. So it's a special place, San Ignacio Lagoon, and has a special community of gray whales with a cultural history. Now I have a little video for you of some of that encounter kind of action. Had a GoPro, if I get my mouse to move. Sorry about this. Come on, mouse. There it is. Okay, so this was done with a GoPro held high in the air above our ponga. So you can get a sense of what one of these large juveniles looks like when it's approaching a skiff for an interaction. Hope it's not too choppy for you. I know it may be, and I apologize. It's just a little bit about bandwidth, I guess, and size of the files.
It's fantastic.
This is a very common kind of encounter. It's not just calves, it's these single individuals as well that come along to the pongas on a regular basis. Come on, there we go. Oops, jumped ahead one too far. So San Ignacio is an amazing ecosystem. It's a lagoon. It has no other source of water to it. It's all tidal water that flows in and flows out. But it has quite a lot of shallow areas, and including areas that are mangroves. And so it's home to a huge diversity of other kinds of animals, from sea lions, those dolphins I mentioned, sea turtles, green sea turtles come in to feed, and just vast numbers of birds. You see a huge aggregation of Brandt's cormorants in the lower left and brown pelicans and Brandt's cormorants in the upper right. Brandt's cormorant on the upper left picture, a single animal. And then many kinds of terns and gulls come in, and these are some royal terns who've captured fish by plunge diving into the surface. So this ecosystem is very rich. And one of the richest parts of it is its mangrove channels. Mangroves are one of the planet's richest ecosystems, producing or fixing, as the ecologists like to say, more carbon per unit of water than just about any other ecosystem on the planet. So here we have red mangroves. Now, if you've traveled around the world and seen mangroves, you say, well, those look pretty short to me. In fact, San Ignacio Lagoon is the northernmost extent of mangroves on the west coast of North America. So they aren't as fully grown out as you might have seen if you've visited other tropical parts of the world, yet they are still a very rich system. On the upper right, you can see on a very high tide, a king tide type situation, the water is going way back into the interior. In fact, there's a flooded or a periodically flooded salt plain back there, which is where the salt works would have been on a vast many square mile flat surface that only floods on the highest of tides. So we take our pongas in to go and explore, and it's a great exploration opportunity. First thing you notice is lots of birds. We leave the lagoon with the foraging terns like the royal on the left and start to get to the mangrove trees, where we find herons like the yellow-crowned night heron, the great blue heron from left to right on the top, and white ibis are also present. We have a reddish egret doing its kind of drunken dance down below, where they zigzag back and forth like they're intoxicated, shuffling their feet to stir up fish off the bottom, and loads of shorebirds like these marbled godwits and willets. All of these birds are greeting us just about the time we arrive and start to make our way into the channels. As you go in further, though, it gets a little more fun. And I have to admit, when I was a kid, got to go to Disneyland a few times, and my favorite ride was the Jungle Boat ride. And this is my adult Jungle Boat ride, if you will, into these mangroves. And if you look carefully amongst the prop roots, you start to see some of the shy and cautious residents, such as this little heron here, little green heron, and clapper rail. The little heron got to the shoreline and grabbed a fish right in front of us. But these animals only make rare appearances. They're shy. The rail is aloof, trying to sneak away. Like you didn't really see me, did you? To the right, on the bottom right. So it's fun to get in there and look for these little seen species from this nice, comfortable platform as we quietly motor up through the channels. Oops, sorry, but oops, there we go. Sorry. Then one of the prizes, the treasures of this mangrove area and mangroves in Mexico is a special type of yellow warbler called a mangrove warbler. On the left, you can see how they fit in pretty nicely. At least the female on the left is hard to pick out until she moves. She is a hard individual to find, and the male, though, will sing boisterously and is the only major singer in the mangrove area that I've ever run into as far as songbirds go. And you can see it's quite a handsome individual. A couple of views of that. And then this year, new colleague Tim Melling just blew the charts off when he came up with a vermilion flycatcher in the mangroves. I mean, that's an eye popper right there. Kind of burned your retinas a little bit. Have been going for many years and never seen that bird in the mangroves before. So quite an extraordinary finding. Other animals that frequent the area are coyotes. There is a lot of coyotes. In fact, back in the desert area is full of wildlife. There are pronghorn antelope back there, all kinds of terrestrial animals and reptiles of many different types. And coyotes are frequent around the lagoon, where they hunt birds and will scavenge along the shorelines. So I just always enjoy the chance to see these lovely animals that are so often vilified in parts of the world, like where I'm living now in the Midwest. They're not very well received by a lot of people in farming areas and stuff, but I can't think of them that way. I just enjoy them too much. It's a true survivor of the human-made world, and in the relatively undisturbed world as well, an important predator. As we leave the lagoon, you have to go check out with the local pelicans to make sure you had a good time. And we start to see on the mudflats, as the tide is usually going out by the time we start to leave, accumulations of brant geese. Brant along the Pacific Flyway, most of them gather up in these lagoons along Mexico's coast, San Ignacio being one of them, to feed on the rich eelgrass beds in the lagoon, shallow waters, and particularly in the back of the lagoon in the reserved area. And then on the end of our second day, after whale watching and hopefully mangroves, we don't always get into mangroves, I'll just have to say, just to be perfectly full disclosure, because it depends on tides. But we leave the lagoon, cross the the sand reef barriers, which kick up enormous, beautiful waves, and bid farewell to gray whales and seabirds, and amazing, really amazing place on our planet. From there, we sail all night and head down to Magdalena Bay area. As I mentioned, we don't go in, but we usually wake up around Cabo San Lazaro in the north and sail and zigzag motor our way down to Punta Tosca and beyond in the south. And this has historically been an excellent area for marine wildlife sightings. Here you see some long-beaked common dolphins that we often encounter schools of dolphins in this area, as well as blue whales. Our first blue whales can frequently come from sightings as they did in 2024. Off Magdalena Bay, you can see some views of blue whales. I'll just point out on the lower row, the one towards the middle is an interesting animal. You have to kind of think about what you're looking at. The left are the flukes. The notch is probably evidence of a ship strike that this animal endured and survived. It looks pretty well healed to me, although I'm not a particular expert in that. And then on the right, you just see a little muddy water, and you think, what did Mark put that in there for? That, my friends, is blue whale poop. And we have scooped up blue whale poop, which actually comes up kind of the color of bricks, and red bricks, and has bits in it, indicating what the whales eats. And if you're really into eats, including things like pelagic red crabs and krill, and if you're really into the details, it's about the consistency of cottage cheese if it hasn't dissolved yet. Just thought I'd share that point. Anyway, blue whales, fascinating. And they were there in 2024, foraging away, pooping their little hearts out, or big hearts out, I should say, size of a car, a compact car, and having a great time. We saw probably 15 to 20 individuals near Cabo San Lazaro that year. Again, loads of dolphins, big schools will gather up and chase along and forage, often with many kinds of seabirds overhead, taking advantage of the dolphins' great skills at finding prey in the ocean environment. They're excellent with their echolocation at finding and driving prey to the surface, which makes it available to many kinds of seabirds. Green sea turtles, as this one, and other species start to show up if the waters are calm in these warmer Baja waters. So we have had many sightings of sea turtles along this transit outside of Magdalena Bay. Seabirds start to change a little bit. They become a little more tropical in nature. In the middle, the three animals from left to right in the middle are different kinds of boobies. On the left is a masked booby. We don't see those too much farther north, although there are records certainly, but not in our experience commonly. And then in the next one to the right is a type of masked booby called a Nazca booby. See the color difference of the beak. It's kind of peachy colored versus yellowish. And that booby actually nests on Clipperton Island in the tropical Pacific, and it ranges out, and we've seen them several times off Magdalena Bay. And brown booby is the next booby to the right, which is a booby we see frequently in the Gulf of California. And finally, on the right is a Laysan albatross. We do see albatrosses on this trip on a regular basis on that first day out of Ensenada, and then once again on this morning when we're in deep water usually north of Cabo San Lazaro. So this is a Laysan albatross. There is actually a colony of these, a small colony of these, that's formed on Guadalupe Island. However, the other North Pacific albatross that isn't super rare, the black-footed, when we see them, we know that's pretty cool because they come all the way over from the northwestern Hawaiian Islands and usually do that in the span of a week to 10 days. It's kind of a feeding commute run, and they go back to feed their chicks on those Hawaiian Islands. And then just like it was no big deal, come back over to the West Coast upwelling zone to forage on squid and whatever they can get. And they repeat that cycle through the whole period of chick raising. We also start to see frigate birds, upper left and lower right. Lower right happens to be an adult female who has a black head and white chest. Males are all black, and juveniles have a white head and white chest. So blue-footed booby above is not so common outside the Gulf, but it becomes the booby we see along with browns frequently inside the Gulf of California. And then upper right and lower left from this year are some of one of my favorites, a red-billed tropic bird, which occurs throughout the waters of warmer waters of Baja California, and particularly in the Gulf of California. Gorgeous birds with that long streamer central tail feather. Actually, pair of feathers. We have encounters with California sea lions, my friends from La Jolla, but a different batch. California sea lions are actually segregated on our coast, and the ones in Baja don't usually end up in California and vice versa. There are plenty of them in Mexican waters and also in the Gulf, where there are more degrees of separation and isolation with several distinctly different, genetically distinct populations that don't mix too much. But offshore of Mag Bay, they too hunt amongst the dolphins and the seabirds. You can see brown pelican, if you look carefully in the lower right, has captured a fish as it's plunged into a group of feeding sea lions and dolphins. Okay, so after that incredible day where you've hardly had a moment to sit down because there's usually so much happening throughout the day, we sail all night once again, a common theme, and we wake up off in what we call the Cape region, which is the lower part, the bottom of the Baja Peninsula, where at the very bottom of it is Cabo San Lucas, and then you can see it's actually kind of runs a bit northeast from there, and as we turn the corner there, we go on to the Gorda Bank, which is the important humpback whale gathering point in the Cape region, although they can be found all along that coast. That is where mothers with calves are more frequently seen, and really active surface groups of presumably courting whales are found. And you can have just all kinds of fun there with humpback whales. Humpback whales have to be just about the most fun of all the large whales in that they can be so active, so dynamic at the surface. They kind of wear their giant personalities on their giant flippers, as far as I'm concerned, and interact with each other boisterously, aggressively. They trumpet blows and smash into each other, come up kind of bloodied on the top of the head and scraped and bonged up. And so there's no end of interest in watching humpback whales or time to spending with them. You just never are bored. No, this picture is a whale ending a breach and coming back into the water, but I kind of view it as my humpback whale pool toy image. Even on the windy days, it's a lot of fun to watch humpback whales. You can see one breaching on a very blustery day, spray flying everywhere. Humpbacks will smash their flippers on the surface, raise them in the air like sails. They'll thrash and slash their tail flukes and tail stalks at each other and onto the water. They'll lob tail to make noise. All of these things are usually done in a social context to both, we think, attract and maybe discourage other whales from coming around, depending on what the individual whale is trying to signal in its particular case. But they are just super social. These are some pictures I was very pleased to get from inshore in the Cape region. Mothers take their calves away from the more dynamic and active surface groups in towards the beach in the Cape region. And this is an older calf that is really feeling its oats, breaching and gaping its mouth open and all kinds of great stuff, and spinning as it breaches. So it's just learning the ropes of being a very hyperactive humpback whale early in its life. And here's what that looks like. This is literally how close they get if you ever visit Cabo San Lucas area and venture along the road system out towards San Jose del Cabo, a town about 30 plus miles to the northwest and beyond. You can see humpback whales right along the shoreline, and those are generally enclosed mothers, and you can see the young calf on the left of the picture of the left. And there's what a very young calf looks like. Looks kind of like a little guy, a little newborn kind of guy. Not brand newborn, but certainly young and not fully developed just yet. And you can see the knobs are present, the characteristic sensory or hair follicle knobs, which are found on all humpback whales, are present at birth, basically, and are there throughout life. Okay, the Gorda Banks, fantastic place. Always sorry to leave it, but we have adventures ahead, really amazing adventures, and we head into the Gulf of California, where we spend a number of days hopping from island, favorite site, really, I would say island, but also the peninsula, but I would really say favorite location to favorite location. It's always a struggle when I'm working with the captain and the other naturalist on board with me as to, well, if we go here, we won't make it there, but oh gosh, what do we see? What do we not get to see? All of these places are on the menu, although Santa Catalina, second from the top, is not at the moment. Mexico pulled that from our permits, but our captain of the searcher, Mike Totter, is trying to get it back for us. It's an amazing island of incredible biodiversity. I'll show you some pictures in a moment. But one of our favorite islands is San Jose, third from the bottom, which has a number of places we like to visit, one of which is Punta Colorada or Red Point, which is a location that has a beautiful arroyo with a trail with gorgeous sculpted sandstones. And it has a great interest to us from a marine mammal perspective, even though it's a desert island out in the ocean. The Baja Peninsula has been drifting north along the San Andreas Fault system, separating from the mainland Mexico area for millions of years. And the Gulf has been widening for that whole time. And about 3.5 million years ago, there were cetaceans and earlier roaming in the Gulf, some of them of which died and became deposited in sandstones about 3.5 million years ago. And you see some fossils upper left and upper right that we visit on this little spur of peninsula. So it's amazing to, I think, really in this day and age, it feels amazing to me to be able to walk into a national park and find very undisturbed materials like these on the surface. There has been one proper excavation, but everything has otherwise been in situ for decades that I've been visiting. One primitive or proto-globicephala, which means primitive pilot whale, was excavated by paleontologists from the University in La Paz. But many of these bones remain in place, and there's even a very large sea turtle, part of a sea turtle's carapace there. On the lower right, those interesting little tracks are from a very shy and elusive predator I've yet to see, but we see its tracks on the beach almost every time we visit. I think they're nocturnal on this island. I'm sure they are. This is from a ringtail. If you've ever visited the deserts of the Southwest and driven around a lot at night, you might have picked one up in your headlights. It's a little carnivore, cat-like animal, kind of a cross between a cat and a raccoon looking thing. They are on this island. This island was land bridged, so it has a different kind of biodiversity, more closely related to the Baja Peninsula. Okay, now, whether you like it or not, I'm going to take you back to Guadalupe fur seals, or just go get a glass of water or something if you don't want to hear more about Guadalupe fur seals. But I wanted to tell you a little bit of my history and why this creature is so special to me. I've been, as Susan said, I've been a bit of a semi-professional pinniped sleuth or biologist or enthusiast for a long time. And I've had the good fortune with colleagues to publish a couple of papers on Guadalupes, and I've sort of followed them throughout my professional career. The one in the middle you see there is related to our next location we're going to visit, which is Las Animas, about 5 miles from Punta Colorada out in the Gulf, which we visited for the first time well, we visited it before, but in the first time when we thought there were fur seals there based on a hint from another boat, gave us a recommendation to go take a look, was 2020 before the COVID shut everything down. And we found Guadalupe fur seals, lo and behold. We circumnavigated with Searcher and took pictures all around the perimeter. I sent those pictures to a colleague, Fernando Eloriaga Verplanken in La Paz, and he mobilized more, found out there was other people that had seen them there, some of the operators out of La Paz, the tour operators. He organized all the data, put together a wonderful little monograph for us explaining the development of a brand new colony for this species in the Gulf of California. And the interesting thing about this colony is it was, and when he did all the examination of the photos, it was founded by youngsters. Now you'd think, oh, isn't a colony founded by an adult female who's pregnant, who gets there, she gives birth, and all of a sudden you have a colony? No, a more typical pattern or pathway is for youngsters to find a place, make it home, and grow up with it. And as they grow up and become mature, sexually mature, then they begin to breed there. So this colony is in that growth process right now. So this is what it looked like in 2020. This is only a bit of what it looked like in 2024. There were probably more than 1,000 individuals there. I think there were about 70 in 2020. So it's boomed in numbers. And then we visited again this year, this time We were able to take skiff rides around the island and get to see some of these animals a little more close at hand. And I guess these are somewhat reminiscent of the pictures you saw at San Benitos, but I can't see them enough. Love this creature and its appearance and its feistiness and its will to survive, its ability to overcome near extinction and rebound so magnificently. They always have a special place for me. Okay, jumping right along. Now, I mentioned Catalina Island, which we haven't visited for a number of years, but we're hoping to get back to. Stay tuned. We'll have that'll probably be something that'll show up on the Searcher's website if you follow a Searcher and her tours every year when we do get to go back. One of the amazing things about Santa Catalina is it's never been land bridged. However, a rattlesnake got there from the Baja Peninsula, a type of rattlesnake, and it evolved in isolation and it lost its rattles. There are no large land animals on Catalina, so it is the famous Santa Catalina rattleless rattlesnake. And we do see them occasionally. They're rather cryptic and hard to find, actually, and they will climb up into trees and shrubs a little bit as well. They hunt birds, lizards, and mice that are naturally occurring on the island. Santa Catalina is also famous for its cactus forests or cardinals or cardinal forests. The largest examples of barrel and cardone cactuses pretty much anywhere in the world have evolved on this island, also in isolation. Enormous, prodigious size. All right, in the waters in the lower Gulf, we frequently see loads of blue whales, fin whales, also Bruda's whales, and a few others I'll tell you about. Here we see a very interesting blue whale sighting from this year. In the left, you see a blue whale with its flukes up with some very interesting blemish markings on the undersides. Well, this is a well-known whale. He is in happy whale, and I say he intentionally. It's a male. He goes by the name Bunny or Calabasas, depending on who you're talking to. And he is following another blue whale quite closely. And when this happens, researchers from Cascadia Research Collective, John Kalambakidis, published a paper where they took some biopsies of groups of whales, of blue whales, with one steady follower of another whale staying in relatively same positions. Turns out the follower is typically a male who's following typically a female and singing as he goes along. So he's probably trying to make his presence known to her and to keep other male blues away, probably hoping to have a chance to mate. Well, this female at this point, one point in this sighting, was starting to have none of it. And she took off. And I've never seen blue whales move so fast. They were literally practically porpoising, rising their heads and chins out of the water, making terrific splashes, as you see on the right. And this chasing went on till we lost sight of them. We couldn't keep up. They just took off and sped away from us. We were going 10 knots, and that was nothing. They were on their way, and this chase went on until we couldn't really see them any longer. Pretty extraordinary experience. But who doesn't like a blue whale? I think they're fascinating creatures, beautiful animals. Of course, of all the spectaculars of the heaviest and the longest, although there are some exceptions. If you're a dinosaur enthusiast, you might say, wait a second, wait a minute. And there even are some fossils of an early basilosaurid whale that now may prove to have been heavier, is estimated to actually been heavier. But of all the living things, the blue whale is presently the largest thing alive. And that's a little parasitic barnacle hanging off the very tip of its dorsal fin. Some different views. They have a magnificent spout. It can rise 25, 30 feet, depending on how still the air is, and hang for long periods of time in the air. It's very much like a column, very narrow at its base and throughout its height. It's extraordinary. They are definitely a bluish gray in color. They have a mottled appearance. And you can use, if you look on the right, that's not a good ID picture, but that pattern is variable whale to whale, and it can be used for individual identification. In fact, fluke pictures are not used very much because not all blue whales fluke. Some do often, some do never or nearly never. So researchers have settled on pattern of coloration on the side of the whale to use for photo identification. And you can also see in the upper right, they have an enormous head and rostrum or upper jaws that you could park a car on the top of that rostrum and a very rounded end to it rather than pointed as it is in most of their sister species, things like fin whales and sei whales and Bruda's whale. Much more rounded at the tip is a diagnostic character of the blue whale, as well as their color and great size. The blue whale does come to the Gulf of California for calving. We've seen calves there on a number of occasions with their mothers. They're prodigious in size as well. That's the word of the lecture, I guess. They're born at least 25 feet and not weaned until they're over 50. So bigger than a gray whale and bigger than most humpbacks just at the point of weaning. So we see them with calves in the Gulf. The lower right is a feeding picture. All these pictures by Tim Melling, wonderful shots. The interesting thing about the Gulf of California and another place blue whales gather for calving off Central America called the Costa Rican Dome is unlike, as far as we know, many parts of the world where blue whales give birth, and we don't even know a lot of the places where they give birth. There aren't abundant food resources, but there are in the Gulf and there are at the Costa Rican Dome. And so eastern North Pacific blue whales have actually recovered very nicely. Of all the blue whale populations in the world, they've actually recovered quite well compared to others found in places like the Indian Ocean, the Antarctic, and so forth. So it's probably because they have these food resources. If you want to know more about eastern North Pacific blue whales, I strongly recommend a video I think you can still find possibly on YouTube or elsewhere called Kingdom of the Blue Whale, produced by a researcher, Bruce Maid, at Oregon State University. A really interesting story about tagging and tracking blue whales, satellite type tags, and where they travel and their migrations up and down the West Coast. So if you'd like to get into some of the details, I recommend Kingdom of the Blue Whale. These are some sightings from this year. I wanted to point out in particular, the flukes are magnificent. Remember, those tip to tip can be about 25 feet. And so it's hard to know scale without something in there to show you. But I also wanted to have you zoom in with your eye to the right of the notch. Do you see a little blue, what appears to be a blue spot? That's a perfect hole through the trailing edge of that tail fluke. That's water you see coming through. I'm happy to hear from anybody who thinks they know why that happened. Probably somebody knows. I don't. But I don't think it went to the local piercing shop and had its ring pulled out when it's chasing along after another blue whale. But a perfectly healed, perfectly smooth-looking puncture through the tail fluke of this great blue whale. So have fun with that one. All right, one of our favorite stops in the Gulf is a sea lion colony called Los Islotes, where we take skiff ride tours and snorkel with these magnificent animals. They're just loads of fun, especially when you get to see them maybe for the first time from a whole different perspective, because Mexico, our permit allows us to, where's my cursor again? There it is, wake up. Mexico allows us to snorkel at Los Islotes under our permit. And when you see sea lions underwater, you really get to know how great it is to be a sea lion, at least most of the time, as far as I can tell. If I could swim, if I could be amphibious, and if I could swim anything like even remotely like this, and these days of my life, bend my neck and back like that, I would be a happy camper. So crazy little creatures, and they're quite curious. They see a lot of people there. Boats come out every day from La Paz, so they're more than happy to come over and swim around you and play and have a great time. So they're quite acclimated to frequent visits by people. All right, ashore is a colony, the main colony of the Southern Gulf of California. So there are bulls and mothers with pups and juveniles. At this time of year, not so much new pups, but juveniles, as you see in the lower right, in the lower left, and a youngster, a yearling that's a nice, pudgy, healthy-looking little one that is either waiting for its mom to come back or is weaned. And they will travel with their moms to sea once they hit a certain point. Mother California sea lions are pretty good moms. They often take care of their pups for a full year and wean them only when the next pup is born. So they give a pretty long period of maternal investment. Well, back to the Gulf, and there's some amazing animals out there. We don't see them every trip. I wish we did. But when particularly squid are active in the lower Gulf, squid, a certain kind of squid, the Humboldt or squid, not the giant squid, but the Humboldt squid, which is commercially important, is abundant. Sperm whales show up. Where do they show up from? As far as we know, the Galapagos Islands. As far as how they know to venture from the Galapagos to find squid up in Mexico, don't know that we have a good answer for that one. But groups of them leave the Galapagos and become residential in the Gulf for as long as the squid are running. And at that same time, we can see other squid eating specialists like pilot whales. But these are just some amazing shots by Tim Melling. A great group that he got into with breaching. You can see a group of them logging at the surface there. They will spend a lot of time resting at the surface between diving bouts. And then once they get a little incentive, a little fire lit, or I guess if you're a Giants fan, they get a wild hair up their blowhole, as Mike Krukow might say. They get crazy. And you can see some craziness, some sperm whale craziness in some of these great pictures. So some of the other larger toothed whales that enter the Gulf, particularly the pilot whales during times um, squid are abundant, short-finned pilot whales show up. They're a lot of fun. They're often occurring in fairly large groups. There's a mother with a calf in the upper right. Pretty deep divers, very social animals, sexually dimorphic, with males getting quite a bit bigger fins and bodies than females. And they'll sometimes lay two in the water vertically, as sperm whales will do sometimes too, just sort of bottling below the surface in a resting posture. On the left, we've seen killer whales there, not frequently, but every few trips. This happens to be a male that we found off Catalina Island, and it was in others in its small group were attacking rays and killing a large spine-tailed devil rays. So what kind of killer whales are these? Good question, if you asked it or thought about it. There are a number of different ecotypes of killer whales. Our guide, Tom Jefferson, and I and Bob Pittman worked on lists a number of the ones that were in play in 2015. That guide is under revision now. These are a type that is not in that guide specifically, but are probably Eastern Tropical Pacific type killer whales, which is the best opinion of some of the workers from California and Mexico who look at killer whale that are seen in the Gulf of California. So Eastern Tropical Pacific, which are a wide-ranging species, or excuse me, ecotype, as they are yet to be completely verified, but that's what they're provisionally called. They range from Central America, Mexico, all the way out towards the Hawaiian Islands, but not two, in that general big triangle of the Eastern Tropical Pacific. So we do see them. It's always fun to see killer whales, and we've seen some really interesting behaviors as well. Now moving on to some of the other toothed whales, donocetes, bottlenose dolphins, offshore and coastal, are fairly abundant in the Gulf of California. And you can see here, they can get pretty jumpy themselves. And here's a nice sequence of an animal that got way up, got some good air. Remember, that animal's probably about 11, 12 feet in length before it's turned the corner and headed back for the ocean. And here's something from this year at Catalina Island. Now, bottlenose dolphins aren't brown. This happened to be taken right around sunset, so it made these very gray animals look rich reddish brown because of the low sun angle. But we were extremely lucky to see these guys get airborne, and I think we had something like 7 or 8 in the air at one time. Now, other dolphins of the Gulf are common dolphins, two kinds, short-beaked and long-beaked. I've already shown you a couple of pictures of the long-beaked. Here are some short-beaked common dolphins that rarely get into the Gulf. They're more common on the West Coast and off the Cape. But here you see a nice selection of pictures from a very energetic school we found in the channel between Cerralvo Island and the peninsula a number of years back that Chris did a great job photographing. And Tim got these animals. Now the upper left is actually, I think that's near Ensenada and the Todos Santos Islands, and then another long beak group. These are long beaks, bow riding in very glass calm waters, which is always a real joy to see. Well, the desert is home to numerous birds, some that are quite unique to it. I'm not sure where I'm at with time. I'm probably running on, so I'll try and speed it up. Some of the various land birds that are present in the desert. In the middle, you see a roadrunner. The upper right is a personal favorite, a Virden. A couple of oriole types on the left, lower left. And the little hummingbird in the upper left is endemic to Baja, the Xanthus hummingbird, of which there are a number of endemic bird species to the Baja area, its islands and its peninsula, especially around the Cape region. Some of these we see pretty regularly, such as the thrasher, the yellowthroat, the yellow-footed gull we see every trip, and the hummingbird, a little more close-up view. And then there again is our sparrow from San Benito's Island. And there are other endemics in Baja, which you can visit or find by taking excursions after the trip in the Cape region behind Cabo San Lucas and San Jose del Cabo up into the hill country. Well, we towards the end of our trip, we almost always seem to have a nice grand finale. Here are some Monk's pygmy devil rays, or mobula rays, as we sometimes commonly call them, going crazy, which they have a tendency to do in big groups towards the night as night falls, and they get just super jumpy, and it's a lot of fun to see these things launch as high as they can into the air, flapping their wings madly, their big flipper wings madly before they crash back out down into the surface. So these are plankton-eating rays that can occur in schools of thousands in the lower Gulf of California. Some of the other animals in the Gulf and on the trip, pelagic animals, we do at times offer an extension during the trip to go into La Paz Bay to swim with whale sharks. It's not an every trip occurrence, but that's an upper left. That's a picture from that visit. We do sometimes see them from Searcher. Here's a picture in the middle of one that was discovered right alongside us, was because somebody was clever enough to look down. We otherwise would have probably gone right by it. Some of the spine-tailed devil rays that were being eaten by the orcas on the right. Mola mola, the ocean sunfish, is common in northern Baja waters often, and several kinds of sharks can be seen swimming just below the surface in the Gulf, such as the scalloped hammerhead and a mako, left to right. And then that's a striped marlin jumping. We see those frequently also in the lower Gulf, particularly around the Cabo Cape region area. All right, I'm about done, but I wanted to show you and acknowledge some tremendous friends, some lost colleagues, and a new future. Captain Art Taylor and my great friend Paul Jones invited me to Searcher. Paul introduced me to Art. Art invited me to Searcher along with his partner Celia Condit, and I joined them over 12 years ago and have never looked back. Art and Celia have since retired, and Mike Totter has taken over as owner-operator along with his friend and our chef on trips, Josh Evans. And Mike came up as crew on Searcher and is continuing the tradition. Some friends that are departed, Peter Dunn and Izzy Shaponiak. Many of you know Izzy, of course. Peter is an outstanding naturalist from the UK who's traveled the world with Nature Trek. We lost him just a few years ago. This year very fortunate to work with Tim Melling. You saw a number of Chris Early's pictures throughout the talk. And last year got to meet and really enjoyed working with Kate Sutherland, who's a tremendous birder and is part of Team Searcher. And then also got to meet an amazing academic, Dr. Andrew Treitz from University of British Columbia, who's a famous ecologist and physiologist of pinnipeds, who came on a trip as an alumni trip for the universities of Canada. And he was one of the co-leaders, and I was very fortunate to work with him. So my hat's off to all of these great people. They have helped make Baja an extremely special place for me in so many ways, and they're all very important to me. All right, at the risk of going a little over the line, I wanted to just tell you that there is a trip on next, well, there are several trips on next year, but in particular, Tom Jefferson and I have been invited to lead as naturalists February 4th to February 15th, 2026 trip with Tabitha, who's our resident naturalist for Searcher, and the owners, Captain Mike and Chef Josh, 12-day expedition. If you need more information about this, I think Susan's going to load the bottom middle onto the chat. You can visit bahawhale.com and find out much more about the trip, including how to sign up. And do us all a favor, if you would, please spread the word if you think you know anybody who might be interested. Well, that's it. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't run on too long and too over. But I'm happy to field questions through our chat. And also, just in passing or in parting, I'll just want to say one more thing. Baja's a great place to see the green flash, which really does exist. It's not mythology. And here's a picture to prove this is rather an unusual one. It more frequently is down the horizon line, but there you see a type of green flash experience that you can see in Baja, California. So thanks, everybody. Susan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Wow. Well, I don't know, like probably I'm not the only one that's just kind of speechless, just the wonder of it all. So thank you so much, Mark. And Wade, are you still on board? I know you're on the East Coast, but maybe we have time.
Yeah,
Just a
Yeah,
couple.
I'll try to keep it somewhat brief because I think
Yeah.
Mark, you might also be on the Eastern
Well,
time zone too, right?
I'm on Central. Wait, it doesn't
Okay,
matter.
so
I'm
you got
in
a little
on
bit
the
earlier.
Federation, and I again
Um,
apologize to everyone if I for running on so long. I
no,
think
no, no, not at all.
Oh, it was
Everyone
great.
was enthralled. We only lost a couple people along the way, and I think it was all when you were talking about the blue whale cottage cheese poop. So
oh, okay, that'll do it.
it was there was
Yeah,
only a
yeah,
few dropouts.
sure.
Um, but yes, I'm you covered a ton of ground. Let me try to segment these questions a little bit based on category. But apologies if I'm jumping all over the place. Um, so let's start. I guess we can start with seals. So do you have any theories on why the northern elephant seal has had so much success recovering from hunting?
I don't personally, I guess. The idea, though, is that with protection, it's a very large and durable animal. They can both breed on islands and on the mainland, which they historically, and even, if you will, prehistorically, if you don't mind that word, have always done. And so there was plenty of habitat. There also, people have speculated that there's extremely low competition for what they specialize in eating, which is extremely deep water fishes and squids. They're animals that can dive down to about 5,000 feet. So they probably share that don't share that habitat with too many competitive mammal species, and so they have a very rich place, a very rich zone to which they go and forage. There's probably relatively unlimited amounts of food available to them.
Makes sense. And can you quickly I guess back on the Guadalupe fur seal, could you quickly kind of cover the difference in protected status between the U.S. and Mexico?
Well, yeah. I don't really personally. I'm not conversant in the Mexican protected species law, but in the United States, the Endangered Species Act has two categories: endangered and threatened. And the Guadalupe was downlisted in the United States to threatened a number of years ago, as it's been recovering. Still listed. There are issues still in play because the vast majority of them still breed on Guadalupe Island. Small numbers breed on San Benitos, and there's one place in the lower Gulf that's actually brand new that is also formed with breeding, but that makes them vulnerable, right? Because when you have everybody concentrated in almost one place, and that one place being downrange of very busy marine terminals that handle lots of oil and fuels, if there's ever a tanker accident up off Southern California, where that oil is going to go is south. And Guadalupe would probably be in the pathway of a spill depending on weather and wind. So anyway, there is still reason to be concerned, even though the recovery has been dramatic, that they are so concentrated in just one major location. So many of them are.
Makes sense. And then I guess moving on to whales, you had two slides with younger humpbacks in there.
Mhm.
I think it was on the first of the two slides. It seemed like you were characterizing the characteristic that you were using to define age wasn't necessarily size. Is there another way that you can tell age in humpbacks besides just the size of the whale?
Well, yeah. If you get a little experience with humpbacks, and then you do see some calves, you realize that proportionally the heads are relatively smaller than in an adult. So they do grow in parts of their body at different sort of proportions. And so that particularly young calf with the one with the mother, I think is the one that you're talking about, with the mother with a calf near her near the beach, and then there was a picture of a smallish calf. You might have noticed how small and delicate looking the face and head appeared to be compared to even the larger calf that I showed pictures of that was breaching. It was also that one had become, I'm not sure about that. It could be color variation at birth, but it also was quite a bit darker. But it seems like it had already grown up and filled in quite a bit based on the probably nursing from its mother. That's its sole source of income is milk from its mother at that time of year.
Makes sense. And then there was a hole in the blue whale fluke that looked almost bilateral. Do you have any sense as to yeah, it kind of looked like it was, perfectly even on both sides. I think the person who was asking the question was theorizing a gunshot wound. Do you have any theories on what that might have been?
Well, that's an idea. I'm not sure who would do that, but it's all possible. I'm kind of thinking or wondering if it's something to do with uh, maybe even a kind of parasitic um, infection. There are some parasites that burrow within the skin and come out, and it could have been tissue that was damaged from that result. Good suggestion. All suggestions are welcome. I'll be floating it by some of my. I just saw it this year, just literally a month ago, and I'll be floating it by some blue whale colleague and whale friends, whale specialist friends, and see what they think. The other side wasn't perforated through, though. There was a bit of a beginning of a dent there, but this one was perfectly perforated through and healed. I've looked at the picture quite closely. Should have probably done an enlargement for everybody, but it was, yeah, the edges were all beautifully healed, like it had just was meant to be there almost.
Makes sense. And then we had one question on more of a action item here. There was so Sherry Bondi. She had a sea lion on the beach beside her house in Bahia Asuncion, sorry. And it was emaciated but had a yellow flag on its flipper. Do you know who she should be reporting that to, or if maybe she can reach out to one of us offline? I'm not sure who the right people are.
Well, is she from Mexico or is she in the United States? Is just visiting Mexico when that happened, I guess.
I'm
So
not sure.
I'll operate under
I'll
that
send over
assumption
my
with my
email in
answer.
the
Yeah.
chat, and
Okay.
we can handle it from
Yeah,
there.
you
There
can
might
share
be
my email with her.
and she's saying she lives there.
Okay, great. Well, the university in La Paz is a central point for marine mammal research in Mexico, in Baja, particularly. I mean, and a yellow tag. They do use, I think, some yellow tags on sea lions in the California Channel Islands. So an animal could have come down from United States. So not sure. But I would call, there is our stranding responders, at least for entanglements, in Baja in La Paz. And I don't have the numbers for those. Maybe the Marine Mammal Center here in Sausalito can give some advice. But I know the Marine Mammal Center has partnered with the center in La Paz, and they've exchanged people for training activities and so forth in cooperation. So anyway, there are people in La Paz that she could start to try and find who will probably know the answer to that question, and what, if anything, is done in Mexico with stranded animals like that.
Awesome, thank you. And then I guess shifting gears to more I guess geographical questions, I'll classify them as. Do you know why Mexico pulled the permit for visiting Santa Catalina?
We weren't sure. We weren't sure when that happened exactly, if it was strictly for conservation purposes, or we think now, Captain Mike and I were talking, we're this last trip, and he's going to see if this provides an answer. It is probably administered from a different national park regional office than the lower Gulf. And so when they changed their administration of the permits, they couldn't issue one for Santa Catalina was at least one answer. Now, whether or not we'll get one again, I hope so. I think it's a wonderful place to visit. I understand, however, for conservation reasons, if it isn't allowed because of the incredible biodiversity, I think there's 8 different kinds of endemic reptiles, for instance, on Catalina, and these wonderful cactus forests of these extreme examples of beryl and cardone cactuses. So I would love to go back, and I would understand if it's not in the best interest of the island. That'll be determined.
Makes sense. And then in your experience, just kind of broader Baja California, have you noticed any effects of climate change, or have there been a lot of what's kind of the current state of affairs down there?
Well, that's a tough question. We do see over these many years I've been going changes. Like, for instance, one example of the dynamics of the place is the movements in and out of sperm whales of the area. There was a paper recently written saying they pretty much abandoned the Central Gulf. It seems like the squid population has not been reliable enough for a long enough period of time that a lot of sperm whales have just left the area. Although Tom Jefferson, my colleague, on the trip before us saw sperm whales. We did not on our trip. So they're not in every trip species. They used to be, especially when squid are around, pretty much a given. El Niños changed the dynamics down there, and La Niñas, cold and warm El Niño, cold La Niña water regime periods definitely change the dynamics, can have effects on reproductive success of many kinds of animals, of seabirds, of seals and sea lions. So foraging becomes difficult. And you may, if you follow some of the things that are happening, I'm not saying this is happening in Baja, but right now in Southern California, there's a tremendous eruption, again, not the first time, of domoic acid, which is toxic to predators who eat fish that have domoic acid in their bodies. And sea lions, for instance, suffer, and coastal dolphins suffer from domoic acid toxicosis. So anyway, there are numerous things that go on. Generally speaking, we've seen steady patterns in some animals, and others are more variable. So it's kind of a harder question to answer, but there is variation, as you can imagine, with any ecosystem.
Makes sense. Thank you. And then one on birds, and then I'll let you go. I know it's we're coming up on time here. But on the one where you had different varieties of the booby species,
Yes.
the variations were really interesting there. Do they have different, migration patterns? Do they migrate to different destinations? Are there, more evolutionary reasons for some of the differences, or is it can you go into any detail there?
Well, I'm not an expert by any means on seabirds, but just throw out a few points to that question. At least in my experience, masked boobies are more tropical and semi-tropical. I used to work in Hawaii for the Fish and Wildlife Service in the Northwestern Islands, and we had colonies of masked boobies on the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. We know they're down in the islands and atolls of the Eastern Tropical Pacific, like Clipperton, as I mentioned. Brown boobies and blue-footed boobies typically are more in the Gulf and lower peninsula areas where the waters are not terribly warm and hot, more of a cool water type. And brown boobies have even ranged to the Farallones and beyond. And the third type of booby I didn't show a picture of, which we very rarely see, the red-footed booby, is also a little bit more common in tropical areas. So yes, there are patterns of distribution that are associated, I think, with water temperature preferences, which are driven by, of course, those water temperatures are driving prey availability, different kinds of prey for different species. A lot of boobies are specialists on tropical fish like flying fish. In the Eastern Tropical Pacific, they chase flying fish in the air and in the water. So they wait for them to fly up into the air and grab them in flight, and other times other species wait for them to plunge into the water and follow in right behind them, plunging behind them. So, but anyway, yeah, it's kind of the key point I would make there for the purposes of the trip is the area off Magdalena Bay is a little bit of a melting pot for those animals, where we see several different varieties are possible and sometimes even co-occurring.
Awesome, thank you. And then the last thing from my side, there was some interest in the trips that you had covered at the last few minutes there. I don't know if you have any links handy where people could get more information on pricing and details on those that you can drop in the chat. If not, we can send a follow-up, or I'm sure we'll be posting to our socials at some point.
Susan, did you happen to capture that on that slide to load to the chat, or no? Did it go
Yeah,
by too fast?
I did. I took a
Thank you.
photo of it. I think what we'll do is we'll include that in our next newsletter. Because I don't have it really handy, but yeah.
Well, if you can start, it's kind of simple. You can start with a search for bajawhale.com and you'll get to searcher.
Maybe I did put that in. I'm just like many others, bajawhale.com. Yeah, actually I did put that in. Yes, but Mark, thank you so much. I think I'm not the only one where you've seeded dreams for the night.
I hope so. It's a great place. It's not to be missed. It's one of my favorite destinations for marine mammals in the world that I've visited
Oh,
because of
wow.
the diversity, because you travel through such changing waters, and the Gulf is different from the West Coast, and they share things, but then they're different. So, and things are recovering, gray whales, elephant seals, Guadalupe fur seals. So it's just been a pleasure to have a chance to visit it for so long, over so many different years. I mean, same season every year.
And I think, and thank you for touching on some of the history. And I suspect that almost everybody has stuck around for this for a reason, because there's stories behind the stories. So we'll leave it as to be continued. And thank you to everyone. Mark, thank you. Firuze, thank you. Wade, thank you. And yeah, All right, onward. We'll see everyone in April.
Very good. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming and hanging in there with me with blue whale poop and all.
All right, good night.
Good night.